Hey everyone, welcome back to Ganai's FOSS News. We're starting with a serious security alert that's got the entire PHP ecosystem on high alert. According to Open Source for You, Drupal has just issued an emergency security patch for CV 2026-9082, a maximum severity SQL injection vulnerability that affects Drupal core's database abstraction API. This isn't some minor bug we can ignore. We're talking remote code execution without any authentication needed. Drupal admins across the globe are scrambling to deploy these updates right now because the implications for unpatched systems are severe. What's particularly concerning here is how this vulnerability exposes the risks in the entire dependency chain. When a project as widely used as Drupal gets hit, it sends shockwaves through countless other projects that depend on it. If you're running Drupal in production, don't delay on this one. Sticking with security but shifting to the AI world. Researchers at Hidden Layer have just disclosed a critical vulnerability in ChromaDB that's affecting thousands of AI servers worldwide. This bug, tracked as CVE 2026-45829 and nicknamed ChromaToast, allows attackers to execute malicious AI models on publicly accessible ChromaDB instances without even needing to authenticate. According to Open Source for You, this represents a growing concern around the security practices in open-source AI infrastructure. Think about that for a second. Someone could potentially inject a compromised AI model directly into your system without authorization. The attack surface here is massive because ChromaDB is heavily used across the AI development community. This vulnerability highlights a troubling pattern. As the open-source AI ecosystem grows rapidly, security best practices sometimes get left behind in the rush to innovate. If you're running ChromaDB in production, check your instance exposure immediately and apply patches as soon as they're available. Now here's a story that's making a lot of people in the developer community sit up and take notice. According to Open Source for You, Anthropic has acquired Stainless, the company that builds and maintains the official SDK generation infrastructure used by OpenAI, Google Gemini, MetaLlama, and countless other AI platforms. This is a significant power consolidation in the AI ecosystem. Anthropic is basically now controlling the critical infrastructure that competitors like OpenAI and Google depend on for their SDK pipelines. The concerns here are legit. We're talking about developer neutrality, open standards, and enterprise dependency. If Stainless tools start favoring Anthropic's APIs, or if access becomes a negotiating point in the competitive AI race, it could fundamentally shift how developers build with different AI platforms. This acquisition raises important questions about what it means for tools to be truly open when the infrastructure behind them is controlled by a for-profit competitor. The tech press is rightfully keeping a close eye on how Anthropic handles this responsibility. Shifting gears to something more positive, GitHub has been promoting an exciting vision for India's software development future. According to Open Source for You, as AI agents reshape how software gets created, GitHub believes India is entering a transformative phase where problem-solving ability matters more than traditional coding skills. For decades, software development was gate-kept by those who could master programming languages, understand complex frameworks, and manually build applications line by line. But that's changing fast. With AI-assisted development tools becoming mainstream, the barrier to entry is dropping dramatically. GitHub's view is that India has the potential to leapfrog traditional developer training models and move directly into an era where AI handles much of the mechanical coding work, and developers focus on architecture, logic, and problem-solving. This could be genuinely democratizing. Imagine students in underserved regions being able to contribute to serious projects without years of traditional programming training. It's a bullish bet on how AI is fundamentally reshaping who gets to be a developer. Here's some genuinely exciting news for Linux security. According to its OS, Linux's stable maintainer is making a bold bet that Rust could eliminate up to 80% of Linux kernel CVEs. That's common vulnerabilities and exposures. The strategy centers on a new Rust type that can address an entire class of bugs that C has never been able to fully prevent. If you're not familiar with why this matters, know this. A huge portion of Linux kernel vulnerabilities come from memory safety issues, buffer overflows, use after free errors, and similar problems that are almost impossible to completely prevent when you're writing in C. Rust's type system is designed from the ground up to eliminate entire categories of these bugs at compile time. Rather than hoping developers catch them during code review, Rust makes them impossible to write in the first place. This isn't theoretical anymore. The Linux kernel community is actively integrating Rust code, and the results are genuinely promising. If this works at scale, it could represent the most significant security improvement to Linux in decades. That's worth paying attention to. Good news for the Linux desktop community. HP has announced support for LVFS, the Linux vendor firmware service. According to its OS, after Lenovo and Dell made similar commitments, HP's pledge is significant for several reasons. LVFS makes it much easier for Linux users to get firmware updates through their standard package managers, the same way they get software updates. Without vendor support, Linux users have historically struggled to access BIOS updates and hardware firmware patches in a straightforward way. When major hardware manufacturers like HP, Lenovo, and Dell commit to LVFS support, it demonstrates that Linux is becoming a first-class citizen in their hardware strategies. This is exactly the kind of infrastructure maturation that moves Linux from a niche platform to something enterprise customers and everyday users can reliably depend on. The more major vendors we see pledging support for standards like LVFS, the closer we get to Linux being a truly seamless platform experience for hardware. And finally, here's a surprising revelation that flew under a lot of radars. According to its OS, Microsoft's Azure Linux 4.0, the latest version of the custom Linux distribution Microsoft uses in Azure cloud infrastructure, is quietly built on Fedora. This detail was discovered in Microsoft's GitHub repository. Now, why is this interesting? For years, Microsoft has been publicly committed to Linux and open source, but there was always some skepticism in the community about how deep that commitment really went. Finding out that Azure Linux is actually based on Fedora, one of the most respected upstream Linux distributions, suggests Microsoft is genuinely building on the shoulders of the open source community rather than going it alone. Fedora is known for its cutting-edge approach and strong alignment with open source principles. By using Fedora as a foundation, Microsoft is essentially saying they trust and depend on the community-driven Linux ecosystem. It's a small detail, but it tells a bigger story about how deeply integrated proprietary tech companies have become with open source. The days of proprietary systems completely separate from FOSS are long gone.